Hello dear viewers of my channel. This is the new part of the manhwa you've been waiting for. If you want to support me, then please give me a like, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to write something in the comments. I wish everyone an enjoyable viewing experience. Deep in the night, a huge tower rose up. The artifact started screaming with all its might, while Lloyd wondered if it was the artifact they wanted. The artifact didn't respond to any of the castles that were in the area, but the artifact's attention began to be attracted by something else. Lloyd stood near a huge number of locks and thought about his own. The hero realized that the artifact had probably fallen nearby and had taken this shape because it was close by, while Xavier couldn't understand what these things were hanging around, and Lloyd explained that they were love locks that tourists hang. If lovers hang a lock in this place, they can count on eternal love. The boys started to leave, as it would be problematic for them to take the artifact when there were so many people in the place. Suddenly Xavier heard the voice of Lloyd, who was looking away and seemed to have a very sad look. The main character was looking at the people who had gathered and were looking at the beautiful views. Lloyd was looking intently in that direction, paralleling the memories of his family and how they were together in that place. Lloyd said it wasn't just pieces of metal, but a memory and a promise that had been made to someone. Lloyd said with a sad look that it was a very important memory, and a hope that they could meet again. Xavier looked at his master carefully. Time continued to pass. Xavier and Lloyd sat down on a bench and looked at the happy people. Xavier asked if Lloyd was happy that he had come here, and the boy didn't understand why he wanted that information. Xavier was very curious about what kind of person Lloyd was when he lived in this place. Lloyd said it wouldn't matter right after they dealt with the artifact. Xavier said he was just curious, and Lloyd asked him not to cross the line anymore, as it was just a business relationship between them. Lloyd looked at the people and thought about how long they would have to wait. They were happy together. At the time, Lloyd thought about destroying other people's memories just because they were bothering him. He remembered the excitement and warmth when you locked the lock. Then he thought that it was as boring as possible. He looked at the happy people and thought that he would like to experience those feelings again. Suddenly his face twisted and looked less human. He turned to Xavier and asked what was wrong. Lloyd said with incredible fury that from now on he didn't want to be human. Xavier could not understand the hero at all, for such a radical change of mood had happened just instantly. A smile appeared on Xavier's face as he seemed to recognize his master, while Lloyd said with a mad look that they would break everything and then simply blow up everything in the place. Xavier smiled, as that was exactly what Lloyd was, whom he respected. Lloyd started kicking people, shouting that the place was closing and they had to leave as soon as possible. Everyone was looking at Lloyd, who looked like a real madman. Suddenly he and Xavier grabbed the artifact, and Lloyd started taunting people, saying that after they parted no one would remove the locks. That's why he decided to do it himself. The voice of the police was heard and the hero's face changed. They called the guys real villains and said that they would do justice now. They shouted together as one that the thunder of retribution would destroy evil. They began to form a strange figure out of their bodies, and then together they fired electric tasers, which flew towards the guys. Xavier instantly tore towards the stun guns, and then with a dexterous blow repelled a few of them. All the girls who were around fell in love, because Xavier was incredibly handsome, and he moved just incredible. They started to take pictures of the handsome guy, after which the posts with his picture instantly collected an unreal number of likes. Lloyd and Xavier continued to drag the fence while the cops continued to chase them. Xavier wanted to deal with them, but the hero said he didn't need to. Lloyd said that they are much faster as they are hardened by hard work. Then they continued to run at a great speed. While the police could not catch up with them at all, they decided to cheat and just started Googling the beautiful thief, and immediately could find pictures of where the guys are at that moment. They instantly reacted and ran in the direction where the guys were supposedly. While Xavier and Lloyd were there, Xavier turned to the hero. He wanted Lloyd to stay in the homeworld a little longer, because they were unlikely to return. Lloyd undressed with the words that he had already seen his family, then looked up at the sky and said that there might be a guy he would like to meet, but it would only happen if he wanted to. At that time, Ko Jaeong himself was working very hard while his comrades didn't understand what was wrong with his face. A man started shouting that he saw the guys around the corner, while his girlfriend was saying that it wasn't the guy's fault at all. The police instantly turned the corner, and then one of the police officers had a look of confusion on his face as he saw a strange pattern, scattered things, and a note in front of him. The note had gold on it, while the pattern began to shrink and eventually disappeared. They approached the note and it said it was gold. It was a thank you for the efforts of the police officers. It was a clear day in the other world at the time. Lloyd, along with Xavier and a huge amount of love locks, arrived at the homeworld. Lloyd was breathing heavily while Xavier didn't realize what was going on. The hero started to shake and he just kept quiet. Xavier looked at his master with worry, while Lloyd began to shout with all his might that he had managed to gather everything he needed. As a bonus, the system gave him 2,800 points. Lloyd said that even fate was giving them gifts and it was very nice. The man stood on the rock and looked at the eerie views around him. He looked at the creepy view in front of him. He looked very tired. He was thinking that to summon a demon king you need to have a strong desire. To kill someone you need to get the body of someone you hate a lot. The man walked inside the cave and thought about the words of the demon king, who directed him to this place. With a sad look he began to look down. There was a body that had been decapitated. And it seemed that this man had died a long time ago, as there were only bones left of his corpse. This man studied black magic for his family, and eventually met his death at the hands of the protagonist, or rather Xavier's sword. The man raised his head in front of him and called out the name Rafilon. Then with a smile on his face began to talk about whether the corpse wanted to know how the man who had done this to them was doing. He said that Lloyd was respected by many now, and added that he had taken from them what they should have had. He was mad with anger. He thought that Lloyd was just lucky and that he was nothing in himself. He started laughing madly and saying that they should kill Lloyd because he deserved it. An aura began to appear around the man, and he said that Lloyd should die in agony. The skull's eyes began to glow very brightly, emitting an eerie energy. The man was glad that the bowl was ready. All he had to do was get the second material needed for the ritual. He looked at the skull and said that there was a lot of fear in this body. He added that it was fear that started the war. He thought that if the war started the king would go mad. He went straight to the king's castle of Magentano. At that time Lloyd broke one of the locks. Then with a smile on his face began to say that he would destroy these signs of eternal love. He believed that if he could not have love, then no one else could have it either. Lloyd, with madness on his face, destroyed all the locks. He seemed to feel revenge for his unhappiness in love. After a while the frame itself was completely free of locks. Lloyd could finally relax, but he still regretted that they had taken so few locks. At that time, the artifact began to give off a glow, after which its form instantly began to change. It turned into a translucent cube and then fell to the ground. Lloyd took the artifact in his hands, and was shocked to see what he was looking for so long and hard. The system awarded the hero 2,800 points for finding the legendary artifact. Suddenly Lloyd's smile disappeared from his face. His gaze went blank. Then he clenched his teeth and his body began to shake, which Xavier noticed. Lloyd instantly jumped up from his seat and said they should get down to business. He said that, and they should create the pearl as soon as possible. Xavier thought that at least they could rest and celebrate the victory, but a smile appeared on his face, for Lloyd is the kind of man who sees only the goal. Lloyd walks confidently towards his goal, wondering what he will accomplish. A little while later in the Mermaid Kingdom it was business as usual. Lloyd and Xavier sailed to the kingdom, and the hero said that they had experienced many things. He talked about how they had built a suspension bridge in the capital, a railroad in hell, a stone glacier for the orcs, a ropeway in the desert, a bathhouse in the Mermaid Kingdom, and they had even built a field for the minotaurs. Lloyd creased his face and asked why good things were created for others. Xavier suggested that it was because of the mermaids' buildings, but he also added that they couldn't affect it in any way. Lloyd then said it was no problem, and with a mad look added that he knew exactly how to get the artifact he wanted for himself, namely by building it in their homes. Lloyd was surprised at the wave of disapproval Xavier was giving off, the look on his face that said that Lloyd was the worst person in the world. Then Lloyd recognized that he was not a good man and accepted it. At that time, in the Mermaid Queen's castle, she welcomed her dear guests, namely a freak and a gentleman, and asked if everything was ready before the pearl was built. The queen said she would give the boys as much support as she could. They only had to ask. Lloyd said they would work hard to bring glory back to the Mermaid Kingdom. Then the liquid started dripping on the floor. The queen didn't understand what happened and asked Lloyd. While the guy was crying, he seemed to be very sad. He pretended as if he was very ashamed, and the queen called him a hero and asked him what he wanted. After that Lloyd was silent for a while. He said that he was sad that he had to build the pearl in the mermaid's territory. She said that they had originally agreed to do it in her territory. He said that as soon as the construction was finished, there would be a war, because there would be people blinded by greed to appropriate such a thing for themselves. The queen's face changed instantly as she seemed to realize that such a scenario was possible. Lloyd said that since he had promised, it didn't matter and he would continue with the construction, but the queen stopped him. She asked if it was necessary to build the pearl in this place, and Lloyd said that it was not necessary, and then the queen suggested to build the pearl in another place, and Lloyd at that very moment achieved what he wanted so much, and then he and Xavier left the castle. Lloyd was completely satisfied with his work. Xavier looked in disbelief at the Lord, and Lloyd confessed that all his words were true, though not all of them were from the heart. Lloyd asked if Xavier thought he was a coward, but he said he was not, and then asked if they could go. For now Lloyd was happy. Lloyd was glad that Xavier was more practical and said that they were now somewhat alike. Xavier looked at Lloyd and thought for a second, then shook Lloyd's hand and they went on with their business. Lloyd also said they would find a way to lock the portal to hell. Then they shook hands again. Lloyd along with Xavier were standing near Lake Kapua, and Lloyd talked about it being the best option to place the pearl. Lloyd asked his pet if he was okay with them starting construction at that location. After the pet agreed, Lloyd began to undress, then began to move swiftly underwater. He used the skill to see if the bottom terrain was suitable for construction, then he used the simulation mode. He also decided to check what will happen after the activation of the pearl, and it began to eject a huge amount of energy, after which the look of the hero changed because the energy was really a lot. He did not even assume that after the installation can happen so. Suddenly, the water with a huge force began to strive upwards. Lloyd also found himself in the stream, and tons of water was going straight to the city of the protagonist. At the end of the experiment, all the buildings would be destroyed and would end up underwater. Lloyd grimaced, as this outcome was definitely not suitable for him and he needed to think of something. While Xavier sat quietly on the shore and played with the hero's pets, Lloyd started to come out of the water, and then he looked sad. Xavier asked what happened, while Lloyd started screaming and complaining that he wanted to see a peaceful old age instead of this. Lloyd said that Xavier could rest, as he had a lot to think about. Lloyd dressed and began his thoughts, while Xavier realized that something had not gone according to plan. He decided not to argue with Lloyd and went for a walk around the beautiful city. He thought about the fact that only a few years ago this place was a half-dead village and now it was so beautiful. He heard a child's voice, and it was the children returning from their studies in the capital, happy to see their father. Xavier looked towards the Paraskis who were trying to learn to play a musical instrument together, and this is the only place where orcs and elves can be friends. At that time, the orc guy was apologizing to the girl. She said that she liked to pump her muscles while dating since she had already gotten so strong. Xavier observed a crazy picture of a very odd couple on a date working out, which instantly caused a flurry of misunderstanding in Xavier's eyes. He pulled himself together, and though it wasn't usual, it felt good to muscle up anyway. While the men finished building a huge statue of Lloyd, another guy made a statue of a dragon. While the dwarf complained that he thought it was some kind of slime, the others were just as fulfilling their dreams and happy to be working. All the people don't even think about hunger. They are happy and help each other. Xavier stood around all this and thought that all these people live peacefully and happily. Suddenly the guy was sad. He thought about Lloyd and when he would be able to join all this. While the main character was surrounded by a huge number of books and tried to find something useful. At that time in the main building, the parents were discussing that they were worried about the protagonist, since he had not left the library since the objection. The father said that Lloyd was not the same child. He had saved their land time after time, and the mother said that he seemed to be a different person. The father looked at his woman in silence for a moment, then was surprised that she noticed it as well. She said that he doesn't even call them mother and father. He was instantly completely changed. They sat in silence in front of each other. The father stood up and said that their son simply decided to take his life seriously and became a different person. The father decided that to thank his son he should give him one thing. It was their family's costume, which is usually given at the moment of becoming a lord, but the father thought his son deserved it. He thought that Lloyd would definitely be happy to receive this suit after everything that had happened. As Lloyd moved down the hallway, a look of confidence on his face, he was going to build a gravity dam to stop the flood. At that time the father said hello to his son, then said he knew Lloyd was busy and decided to get right down to business. He held the garment out in front of him with a very bright smile on his face. At the time Lloyd didn't seem to understand what it meant and smiled casually, calling it stylish and promising to wear it again. Lloyd thanked his parents once again and kept walking as he was in a hurry, while his father asked if he remembered the suit, as he had wanted it since he had seen it on his grandfather, and Lloyd pretended that he remembered everything and was glad that his parents had not forgotten, and then continued on his way, leaving his parents standing alone in the corridor. While his father said with a sad look on his face that Lloyd had never met his grandfather. The next day the sun was shining brightly. The parents said hello to Xavier and he greeted them back, whereupon the woman asked how the boy was vacationing, and he said that when he doesn't do anything it bothers him. The father started talking about how he doesn't understand how they managed to travel so much and not even vacation. Xavier said it was hard to explain what they were doing, and promised to do so after everything was settled. Father asked if Xavier knew where Lloyd was now, whereupon Xavier said that Lloyd was on the river, but father interrupted Xavier, which caused a look of incomprehension in his eyes. The father and mother looked horrified and the father asked if the real Lloyd, who was his son, was alive. Horror froze on Xavier's face. He was incredibly distressed. They stood silently facing each other. Then Xavier broke the silence and asked why his parents had decided to ask such a question. His mother said it was about the suit, which Lloyd didn't remember at all, though he had wanted it badly before, and his father said that after their questions to Lloyd it was as if he didn't remember anything at all and was just guessing. His father said that they had sensed something wrong today because everything about Lloyd had changed, as if he were a completely different person. They thought Xavier couldn't help but notice it, and they were sure Xavier knew. His father said that although the new Lloyd had worked earnestly for their lands, and he was grateful to him, he was still worried about his own son, and asked if he was alive. Xavier fell silent and lowered his gaze to the floor. He remembered the real Lloyd who was dead. He knew that the real Lloyd had been reborn, but it wasn't clear in what body and at what time, so he was effectively dead. He thought about the fact that even though the old Lloyd was a creature of hell, someone had expelled his soul and then taken his body. Xavier realized that if his parents found out, they wouldn't be able to treat Lloyd the way they used to. He looked at his parents' blank faces and realized he couldn't lie to them. And then Xavier took all his willpower and gritted his teeth and said he was sorry, and then said he was sorry for hiding it. The father and mother seemed heartbroken. Most likely deep down they hoped they were winding themselves up. Xavier started to say that actually, Lloyd had been hurt, and now in his head his personality and memory were mixed up. The parents were shocked at the new information and then asked Xavier to elaborate since they couldn't understand. Xavier started talking about how he had always disliked Lloyd, as he had always bullied him. His father understood this and apologized. Then Xavier recalled the time Lloyd went missing and was ordered to find him. He started to say he did, but as he was walking he thought he shouldn't be doing this since Lloyd pissed him off. The parents were shocked at the information they had just heard. Xavier said that it was normal for him to grow up to be so ill-mannered. He had lived a life of constant bullying, and his parents were teary-eyed as they had no idea it was so serious. Xavier said that as soon as he met Lloyd on the street he was rude to him, and then Lloyd told Xavier to go home, and then joked that Xavier didn't have a home. It was at that moment that Xavier couldn't help himself and hit Lloyd right on the back of the head with a wooden sword. The parents were just shocked at the information they had just heard. Then Xavier said that after the incident he calmed down and tried to wake up the Lord. Lloyd woke up and said he didn't remember much but he wanted to be a good person. Xavier told Lloyd that he would be killed as soon as he confessed that he had hit Lloyd. But the hero promised not to say anything. That's how Xavier explained what was happening to the protagonist. The parents were stunned for a while. Then Xavier grabbed his blade and tried to kill himself, but the couple stopped him. Then they said that Xavier was not guilty at all, and moreover he had made a man out of Lloyd. The father thanked Xavier for what he had done. At that time Xavier just smiled. Suddenly Lloyd appeared and said he had some urgent news. He asked his parents to follow him. Lloyd walked past the legendary Xavier, and then he said that Xavier had finally grown up and he confessed that he had learned from a real master. A little while later, inside the room, Lloyd told about the dreams he had about the deaths of people dear to him, and that he needed to build the platinum in order to install the Pearl of Truth. His parents said they were fine with it, while Lloyd was surprised that they had no questions, saying that they had heard even more shocking news and that they were no longer so easily surprised. His father said he understood that Lloyd was doing his best for their lands, and then asked them to ask for their help once in a while. Lloyd said with a smile on his face that it was enough that his parents were healthy. Lloyd announced to the entire nation that the greatest construction project would begin now. Suddenly Lloyd was faced with a huge amount of notifications. He received the skill of eloquence, a huge amount of titles, and the most important skill, namely absolute trust. Lloyd was very happy with the skills he had just received, and then he instantly began to give orders to all the people, while the people like real fanatics cheered and cried. At that time, the team of the unconsumed labor force was also ready to work without rest, as well as the team of heavy equipment, namely the pets of the protagonist. The fifth team was technical support and resource supply, and the sixth team was Xavier who had to do the difficult job. Lloyd started to give a motivational speech to all the people and they were very happy. At that time, high up in the heavens, a huge building that was the management of the heavenly house was magnified. It was all bright and a man asked what the note was. The man turned out to be the chief administrator of the heavenly house, Gabriel. It turned out the note said something about illegal construction. The old man was shocked because the construction was a pearl that could lead to wars and chaos all around again. The man said that it was reported by the Dragon King. The man started to say that humans can do it, then he added that as soon as the senior gives the order, he will instantly start demolition. By the way, this guy's name was Raphael and he was the director of inspection of the Earth world. Dear friends, here is the video and ended. If you like this part then put a like. Thank you very much for watching. See you soon. 날 보고 있으면 baby 너를 위한 멜로디 yeah 네가 뮤지니까 잘 들어봐 play it